I noticed kind of an interesting phenomenon with Bunjie III, the slick black Cadillac, when I installed this Burris Oracle X scope. What happens if you're shooting at a real close-up distance, like 5 yards away? Do you aim above the 0 line? Do you aim above that? Because 5 obviously is closer than 20. We should be aiming higher, right? Not necessarily. And in fact, this scope kind of convinced me otherwise, right? The reason for this, I'm going to show you. I've got a target out here at 5 yards or so. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to range find it with the Burris Oracle X, right? We turn on the scope with that button. And then I'm going to use the Bluetooth remote right here when I'm ready to take a shot, looking through it here. Boom. Yep, exactly 5 yards, right? The interesting observation for me, aside from the fact that that target is very blurry at 5 yards because it's so close and the scope's zoom range is set for, 50 yards or something like that. But very blurry, but the red dot that it gives me at 5 yards is actually below the 0 line. It is below the 20-yard line. In fact, if I look through there, it's like 2.5 lines below it. So it's almost like the same as my 30-yard reticle, but for a 5-yard shot. The reason for that is the scope obviously sits up a lot higher. All scopes do. This one in particular sits considerably higher than your typical scopes, above the arrow, above the rail. The arrow's sitting on the rail. So there's a sort of this optical illusion. Our line of sight is above the arrow. It's not the same as the arrow. So for a closer up shot, the arrow's going to come out of there straight and start to drop over distance. The arrow's going to come out straight, but the scope is up above that. Now, at 20 yards and beyond, it compensates for that. But at 5 yards, because the scope is up higher, you actually have to lift the barrel of the crossbow in order to get the scope, our line of vision through the scope, to line up with the arrow's intended flight path. I'll take a shot at 5 yards using what's basically a 30-yard reticle, and I hit exactly where that red dot was. Can you believe that? A perfect shot at 5 yards. I bet this varies from one crossbow to another. If you have this scope sits up a little bit higher. If I put the other scope back on here, my Excalibur scope I was using before, put that back on here, it might not play exactly the same, but the concept will still be the same in that I'm going to have to aim high for a close-up shot. After 10 yards, we're probably not dealing with this anymore with every crossbow, but I urge you to try it with yours. Play around in the backyard. What you're going to see is at 20 yards, you're using the reticles as intended, but closer than that, at some point you're going to get to the point where you have to raise the barrel of the crossbow up considerably in order to get a dead-on shot at 5 yards, 8 yards, but then eventually it'll kick over to where your reticles are shooting where they're intended to shoot. My first scope on Bunjie had a 10-yard reticle, and I sighted in for that 10-yard reticle perfectly every time. Not a problem. Times change, right? We go on to more modern equipment, and we have to update some of these little principles. Play around with it. Let me know how it works on your crossbow. Frankly, if I'm sitting in a blind and there's a deer at 5 yards, I'm probably just going to eyeball it like I do through the chronograph, just sort of eyeball it, look down the arrow, and put it where it needs to go. I hope you got something out of this video. Check out some more videos from Death by Bunjie. Continue to enjoy Crossbow Appreciation Month. And until next time, all hail Bunjie!